speak about my memories of Lansing in the 50s and the 60s. I'm going to start out in 1951 being as vain as it is possible to be. I'm going to show you my wedding picture. So, got a cute thing there. I said, well, such a waistline that I had at the time. I was born in Chicago, and I taught there for 3 years. And I met Richard when he brought his mother and sister to Chicago for a wedding in 1950. And we were married a year later, July 8th, 1951. Now, when he asked me to marry him, I applied for an elementary teaching job in Lansing. I was told they did not hire anyone of my race, though they were looking for someone for the high school. And Richard got people like Attorney Stuart Dunning Sr. and Dr. Kennedy and others to go to the Board of Education. But because I had taught in Lansing for 3 years, I had been able to get some, pretty good recommendations. People were very, very good about saying great things about me, even better than truly I really was, because they wanted to support me in getting the job here. And I was hired. I went to Lincoln School where Miss Peck was the principal. Incidentally, she is still alive in Bircham Hills. They did hire a person for the secondary school shortly after that. Now, when I moved here, we lived with Richard's parents for 3 years. The most wonderful people you could ever have for in-laws. My father-in-law still worked at Oldsmobile, and he used to walk to and fro every day. In fact, he would go a different way just so he couldn't be picked up. And he was just a very little man. And that was about 4 or 5 miles from the house. But I called her Mother Letts, said, I could cook, I could do whatever I wanted. So whatever for me was to go to Michigan State and get a master's degree, since she liked to cook. And it has never been my real main interest. So Michigan State, was so reasonably priced that you could get the full credit, almost 15 credit hours for what it costs for one course in Loyola University in Chicago. As I remember, it was about $40 per course, and I think you could get almost a complete 15 hours for $55 or something close to that. And so it was just, and the thing that I remember too, my in-laws did not lock their doors. Now, probably that's about the first thing I remember about living in Lansing, because even in Chicago in 1951, one locked one's doors. And I worked at the Lincoln School in the daytime, and from 3 to 9, Richard worked at Lincoln Center. And he also worked earlier at Drop Forge. Later, we worked at the post office. And the school and the center worked out well. Now, Lincoln was supported by 3 agencies. It was sponsored by the Lansing Board of Education, the Lansing Department of Recreation, and the Greater Lansing Community Chest, or what we now call the United Way. I brought along a copy of the history of the old Lincoln Community Center, and I'll just leave that in case afterwards people might wish to look at it. I'll have more things laid out here. In fact, the people of Lincoln Community Center, still get together and have reunions, and they have a golf tournament named for Richard. And just this past Monday, one of the old Lincoln people came by to see if I needed anything, and I just thought, that's just good people. In those days, there were lots of neighborhood stores. There was Kalush's, there was Alexander's had a food store, and Smith's was really kind of the supermarket on St. Joe, because it was bigger than some of the other ones. And of course, the theaters downtown. There was one screen. I went to California at the end of January, and we went to a theater, and there were 25 screens. I I notice here that one of the theaters has 18. Barber shops were around the neighborhood and beauty shops. In fact, my sister-in-law's beauty shop was on West St. Joe. She has been in business for over 65 years and still has her customers. And I'm one of them. And she would never tell her age, but she got to be 90. And then that was the magic number. She didn't think she would mind people knowing she was 90. And Bill Letts, some of you know, was selling stockings door to door. Now the things I remember, of course, are the West Side things. And Bill and his wife lived on West St. Joe. And he and his wife, Ruby, then after he was able to do pretty well in selling those door-to-door stockings, opened a fashion store, first on St. Joe and later on Ottawa. And of course the state bought his property and he opened Letts Bridal Shop, which is now on East Michigan. His dad, Fay Lett, had the furnace business. They were such individualists that some have the S and some don't have the S on their name. And that's a story in itself. But anyway, Fay Lett had the furnace business, and Mark McGuire, his son-in-law, became Fay Lett and Sons. Fay died, Mark retired, but Mark's son still owns the business, and it is wonderful to see those white trucks saying Fay Lett and Sons that you see up and down our streets. Now, I had not sought the principalship, but Miss Peck, who was the principal, had serious knee problems and had to retire. And she told me to apply for her position. And I did so in 1961, and I received the job. And as I said, Miss Peck is very hard of hearing now, but I do see her. She used to live in the Bircham Hills residential part, but she now is in the nursing home. And I wanted to show you my last class picture. These are the students that I had in 1961 before I became a principal, and some of them still lived in town. And it is kind of nice to see the people that you knew way back when. Oldsmobile was buying up a great deal of property in the area, so the school population was shrinking. And we were, and it was a time when we were talking a lot about integration. And I don't think that the old superintendent would have been able, because you have family and you have friends and connections. And I believe that probably was one of the reasons that they brought in a superintendent from out of town, Dr. Manning. And Dr. Manning closed Lincoln School and integrated Lincoln's children in 3 other schools, Kendon, Rio, and Mount Hope. And I hope that I could find for you, if I had things organized, well, there was a letter written by the PTA president. And a part of it says, we should like you and the Board of Education to know that the parents have agreed that transporting our children out of the Lincoln building would be to their benefit. We should like it stated, however, that we were pleased with the fine staff and the personal interest taken in our children by everyone at Lincoln. We do feel that if children are to grow up well prepared to live and work together, we should begin preparing them to do so immediately. And it goes on. And this was written by then Mrs. Burton. Her name now is Mrs. Richardson. And she sings, and sometimes she even appears on television with her singing, because she's a religious singer. I then, was transferred to Post Oak, which was a brand new building at the time, without sidewalks, and they couldn't even open the school for the first 2 days because there was so much mud. And new homes were really being built out there in the Post Oak area, which is well built up now with the new mall and all. But the old community school north of Lake Lansing was also closed, so I became principal really of Post Oak, which included the community school. And I think that you know, it worked out pretty well. But there was just one part of my job that I truly disliked, and that was going to camp. I was a city person growing up in the inner city of Chicago, and going to camp was just not my thing, but I thought the teachers wanted to go and the children loved to go, and I just couldn't send them without my being there. I just did, you know, that kind of mother instinct that you felt you had to go. And it was not the environmental center as it is today. It was the camp where when the kids wanted to go at night to the restroom, you went down the road to get there. So it was, but, and I used to tell parents, this is a big sacrifice I'm making for you going to camp. And I remember, you know, we used to have those meetings before the opening of school, and I can remember one of the central office people telling us about how we ought to dress when we went downtown. And I would even tell the name of the person, but I'd whisper it just to Ed Speed because he might know who that was. But then, and I thought, my gosh, he'd turn over in his grave now if he saw how many of us dressed when we went shopping today. It's a far cry from having your gloves and being, but you know, we also had BIE Day, Business, Industry, Education Day. And the teachers and administrators would visit a business or industry for the day and learn something about their operation. And later, they were invited to come and visit the schools. And I want to share with you, this is a BIE Day, and you will see no pants on the women.
Hold it still a second.
No, it was, and this was March the 9th, 1960. And as you know, there was a great deal of unrest in the late 50s and in the 60s, and Richard was appointed Human Relations Director and worked with Governor Milliken, and this lady was then the national president of the National Association of Human Rights Workers. And this is a picture of the three of them, and Richard involved with the governor. And Richard, you know, tried very hard to find peaceful solutions to the problems of Lansing. And he was the first African-American administrator in City Hall. And he worked, though, with everybody, and I wanted to show you that here are some of the pictures. This is one where he's working with a couple of people as they prepared for their youth parley. And they would have every year, it says, Lincoln Center Parley helps youth face up to challenges of 65. In fact, Jack Davis, who is on the present City Board of our Lansing Board of Education, used to work with, you know, he was a young kid then, and he used to go to the youth conferences that they had at the time. And Richard, of course, I can't say much about how much he loved this city, because he truly did. And he was not going to go to Chicago, that was for sure. So if I didn't come here, we certainly would not have made it. But the Lincoln people, as I said, still do a lot of things together, and I think that's commendable. Now, I left Post Oak in 1969 when I became an area principal, as it was thought that with my new position, Post Oak was too large. And I went to Horsebrook as a principal, and Horsebrook now is, I think it's a state realtor building. And we used to have a little bridge across the back. It was a lovely little school, kind of the size of Lincoln, just about 7, 8 classrooms. So you know that one had to go later too, but I wasn't there when they closed that one. But I just, after going to Horsebrook and going down to the central office, and then I took a year's sabbatical and went on to finish a PhD. And that was the same year my daughter got her bachelor's, you know, and just once she left home, I had to do something else, you know, other than working. So I went back to school, and I guess I'm a person who dearly loves going to school. if I can't go to school right now, I'm doing my line dance, as I was saying. I have to do something that somebody teaches me. I just think it's just good to learn something. And I had a teacher in college who said, every year, all your life, you ought to learn something new every year so that you would know how children felt about having to learn new things. And I still think that's a pretty good thing at any age for us to do, is to try to learn something new every year, and if not every year, every two. In this past February, I went to a new specialist, and we got to talking. He told me what a poor student he was until he got to the 8th grade. There was a special teacher who kept him after school, helped him get his grades up, and he said she was responsible for him getting his medical degree, as she had straightened him out. He looked her up when he became a doctor. I believe there are still teachers who do or try to do that for a youngster that they see with potential. But we don't make it as easy for them to do that now. You know, there's so many safety issues involved with what we do, and other issues too. But I do think there are teachers who work really hard at trying to do that. And one or two other things that I just don't quite fit in where they should, but I wanted to mention that in the 50s and 60s, there were a number of social clubs. You know, we probably stayed in our own groups more often. And a friend, Dorothy Nichols, came over to my home the month my daughter was born, October 1954, telling about the club she was starting. I became one of the members, and you know that next year we'll be celebrating our 50th anniversary. And I think that's pretty good for a social club. And we support one another. One of the members is here tonight. And I just think, you know, we have done that through people's weddings and deaths and all kinds of things. And so this is a great community to offer support. And I also wanted to show you a book. I had a student way back at Lincoln School, and he sent me a copy of a book of poetry that he published and won the 1983 Walt Whitman Award. And I thought that was just lovely that he still thought about the people at the old school. And Lincoln closed in 1965, and he was a student there, certainly in the 5th grade, he said. So it was, I believe he said 1964. And then he still, you know, remembered and sent the family a copy of his poetry. And Mr. Ryder, of course, had some physical problems and doesn't always get the credit for Lincoln Center that I think he deserves too. But he taught Roger Rose how to play the piano, and at an affair we had Sunday, Roger was playing the piano. But this is Mr. Morrison Ryder. And he was the director of the Lincoln Center until the center closed 4 years after the school there. The school closed as a regular elementary, in 1965. And then they had special ed children come in for special programs, but the center closed in 1969. So he, for 15 or 20 years, was the director of it. And I would like to now see if people would like to have some questions or anything that they might wish to ask me. I have a few more pictures, but they also tend to be in the vain category. So if there is, and I have a couple of some people I know well. Ed Spink, I worked with for many years. And I always would say that when I was a brand new teacher at Lincoln, the Board of Education members and all might even come over, and some of them did. But, you know, people were kind. And as I said, Thelma Peck was the principal when I came to town. And I would not still go to see her if she had not been nice to me. So she was just fine. And the people that and sometimes occasionally there were people who did not maybe say what you thought ought to be said in quite the way it should be said. But I also thought that if I got the person in the hall and talked to them about it, it took care of the problem, and they were not embarrassed in front of people, and they remembered afterwards the way I thought they should have said or not have said, whatever they did. So I have very good memories of Lincoln School, of the Lansing School District in particular, and have a hard time because I now live outside of the district, not far, but outside, and I haven't gone to any of the meetings they have because I feel a little guilty that I might not be quite as supportive as I need to be, and I think they have a fine superintendent, Dr. Banks, these days. But if somebody would like to help me by asking me, or because of something I may not have remembered. Ed, you were around that time. Of course, now Ed Spink's mother, shows you how old I am. And his mother and I were in class together, because I remember the class so well that I took at Michigan State when I was working on my master's. And the reason I remember was because I put my maiden name on my paper, and the teacher couldn't find me. Oh. But I remember he had a delightful mother, and she was just a great principal and a very good friend. And I don't know if Ed, who worked in the school district for, well, I don't know, he may not be quite as old as I am, but he's getting close to it. So if there's something you'd like to say, and Janetta, who just retired as the principal several years ago. You know, you're the two people who know the Lansing schools, and some of you may be former Lansing school personnel, I don't know. And if you are and you have some comments or something you remember that I may not have, because I lived on the west side and still do. Yes.
Well, I don't mind, excuse me, saying something.
She's got to be able to see you. No, just turn around.
That's all right.
Just so she gets the camera can.
I just wanted to say that I retired in '88, and I was principal at, I had been at Berlinden for 5 years before I retired, and almost the entire time that I was here, she was one of my big bosses. Always so nice to relate to. And I loved my children, I loved my teachers, I loved my parents, so I had a wonderful experience.
That's great.
And as my husband can tell you, sometimes I kind of miss And by living here right in the city, I run into some of my parents,
Sure you do.
and Laura can tell you that too. But they are so glad to see me and so grateful for their children having been in my schools. So when I run into ex-parents, I feel like I'm 10 feet tall. So that's why I kind of miss my job.
Well, that's the thing about living in the Lansing area. I think it's a big enough community, what with having the state capital in Michigan State, but small enough so that you do see people. And that was the one thing that when I wintered in Arizona for 3 winters, you know, that's the difference. You know, you go with your friends and you know them, but now you can go almost any place in Lansing, and if you have lived here a number of years, you're bound to see somebody that you know. And Ed, is there any comment you might wish to make?
Well, I was at Michigan Avenue as principal when you were at Lincoln. I went there in 1960. The summer programs of Lincoln Center were certainly outstanding. The playgrounds were just a beehive of activity from noon until 8 o'clock at night, 5 days a week. And the Lincoln Center staff, because I was on the playground at Berlinden, the Lincoln Center staff was very involved in that part of the city in the summer program.
Yes, yes, they sure will on the west side, and there were, you know, a number of people, you know, they had the teen sports and all kinds of things that tried to keep the children occupied during the summer. And you know, and here I have a couple of, a look at Lincoln Center activities, and here's some you see, and there's the things about it, you see some of the people who still are in town, but they now are like 40 years older. But, so I'll leave out this picture so you can see. But a number of people are still around who did work in them. And this was what Lincoln School looked like in those days. And that's it's true. I just think, I don't know about the playgrounds now. I know they have them, but I know they've been having a hard time the last few years, having enough finances to support them in the way that they wanted. And I don't know, money is such a big problem now, and maybe that was a problem way back then, but you weren't as aware of everything, the cost of everything when it came to children's programs and things like that we are aware of now. So that's it. Yes,
Yeah.
Dr. Nickerson, Jackie.
I came here in 1966, and Olivia was the principal at Post Oak School, and my daughter entered Post Oak School, I think in the 2nd grade. And after Olivia left, then, didn't you, Ed Spink came to Post Oak, right?
No,
No, that was another Spink?
no,
Ken
that was
Springer.
Ken Springer.
Oh, Springer,
Springer.
okay.
Oh.
I knew you at another school. Northwestern?
Yes,
Okay. I had student teachers with you. up
Right.
there. Okay.
Dr. Nickerson worked with a lot of student teachers for a number of years, and they come into our elementary schools with the programs that she had.
But I know I was very impressed when I came here and did have an opportunity to visit the school. I thought there were a lot of good things going on, and I really did.
And I think, I think we just don't give credit enough even now, that a lot of good things still go on. And I do believe that when people are doing all the things they're doing with their children, that they have to make certain that whether the children are in a charter school or in a all-Caucasian school, because there are no all African-American schools anymore, that they see that the children get other experiences. Because the people you are not around, you either sometimes dislike or you're fearful or what have you. Whereas if you grew up having those experiences with all children, and I, as I say, most of what I say, sometimes I get a little vain, but my daughter, well, she had a lot. It was a little easier for her. People talk about their teenagers, and sometimes they have problems. But it was hard to have a problem when your father was at all the games, and he was at all the activities. So, she could go and be with her friends, but he was not far away. So I just never had to have any of those kinds of problems. And the fact that, people would call up at 2 or 3 in the morning, especially during the 60s, because there was a lot of unrest. And even the police would call up if they thought there was going to be a problem. They would call Richard, because Richard would know some of the people involved, and sometimes he could cool things off when other people couldn't. And so our daughter got to see the folks who were sometimes the ones who were causing problems, and the mayor, the police chief. And so I just think she was very fortunate in being able to have those kinds of experiences. We all can't do that for our children, but we can give them experiences with people who are high-ranking, people who are maybe not on the same economic level that we are, and a different race than we are, because it is such a small world now. I went to California, as I said, at the end of January. When I got off the plane, you would have thought I was in a different country, and that is the truth. There were very few Caucasians in the airport. There were very few African Americans in the airport. There were a mixture of all kinds of races as far as the color, and speaking all kinds of languages. And so I just say we owe it to the children of today to try to make them as broad as possible with knowledge about people that may look different or speak in a different way than they do. Now, if there are some of you can, yes, Mr. Howard.
I was born in Lansing,
That's right.
and I left in the mid-50s because there was no employment for people with college educations.
That's right.
When did the community of Lansing open its doors for professional blacks to work in this town? I was away till 1970.
Well, I
A lot
really,
of the young folks who are my generation could not find employment.
I think that was part of what Richard's job was as the human relations director, when people would tell him that they weren't not able to get employment in the 60s and all, that he would go to the employers and they would work, and even with his Human Relations Board, and try to make changes, because you're right, and there were not the kinds of jobs that people who had gone, you know, to college certainly could have. So it certainly was in the late 60s. Well, as I said, Margaret Rose reception that you attended last Sunday, and they said she was the first black teacher in Saginaw. I did not know that.
Yeah.
But she came to town here and was not able to get a job. I don't know the circumstances of it. So I do know that, but that was part of, I think, what the Human Relations Department tried to work on in the 60s and still in the 70s too. And you know, there's still, I think there's a different kind of problem now because we have more ways of being subtle about things. But I think it was certainly more in this. But then the teachers, there were not a lot of teachers here, and Margaret Rose and some others would go to the Arizona and to places like that to try to find Hispanic teachers, and to the southern schools to try to find African American teachers, because the people had gone away, as Wilbur Howard's saying, there were not jobs, or people didn't think they had employment, that they brought in people, and so certainly that is what happened in the 70s. Any other questions or comments that anyone, go ahead, you wanted to say something.
I don't know when the segregation of the schools started here, but I started here in kindergarten in 1927, and there were African Americans in my class.
Where were you at school?
I went to Walnut Street
Okay.
School, and for the elementary schools, and then I went to West Junior, and then I went to Central, and we always had African Americans in our class.
Well, when I became the principal of Lincoln, it was all black. And in fact, a white child might come in the morning, but would be gone by the afternoon of the next day. So it became, and that certainly, and that was in the 60s. So, and I don't know, it was called Logan Street School. But you see, and a lot of, you went to Logan Street School. And then, I don't know, I think it was either torn down or whatever they, and then it became Lincoln School. And when I came in 51, I don't believe there were, the whole time I was there, I don't believe there were 3 Caucasian students. So when it happened from then on, because, and I think people lived in more segregated neighborhoods too. And I remember when the highway was going through, there was some realtors tried to stir people to certain locations. And I know Richard and the Human Relations Commission worked on that too, because West Side in that area then was pretty well segregated. And
Whereas earlier, it wasn't.
well, and it depends, of course, too, on how many people are in town. Plus Oldsmobile, factory was over there, and so any other? Yes.
Where was Logan, or the school, or Lincoln School? Where was that?
On the corner of William and Martin Luther King. It was called Logan Street.
Oh,
It was on the corner of William.
Logan
It's
Street.
now some part of Oldsmobile. There's a building.
Oh,
But
I see.
Oldsmobile bought so much of the property in
Uh-huh.
that area, and that some of the folks that they weren't buying were unhappy because they wanted the thing, wanted Oldsmobile to buy the property because it would give people a chance to move out to different areas. And one of the areas they tried to stir, I think, people too, was on the south side in Churchill Downs, and they were working really hard so that Churchill Downs didn't become an all minority area, and tried to keep it integrated. And of course, any other comments or questions anyone have? Well, I'd like to thank you, and this wasn't as hard as I thought it would.
Thank you so much.